Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining on the webinar today with eDynamic's team. We're glad to have you here, and we are hoping that the session today is able to throw some interesting light into topics that are very related and very conversant with digital marketing in 2012. We've tried to cover all the relevant and succinct aspects of marketing with respect to content and context, and I'll speak to more of these as we go further along in the session. I'll talk a bit about eDynamic. We are a unique digital solutions firm, and we are unique in the sense that we blend strategy, technology, as well as experience to enable digital marketers to engage with their customers across multiple channels. The things that are going for eDynamic are that we are one firm that's truly global in nature. We are spread out across North America, Europe, the Middle East, and India, and our global footprint has led to more than 250 customers globally at this point, with more than 1,000 projects delivered. A body of work spans verticals such as legal, financial services, manufacturing, education, technology. We are on the fast track to growth, and we have been pretty much doubling our size for the past 3 to 4 years, and with the team extending to more than 300 people across various locations, we are poised to serve Fortune 500 as well as mid-sized customers across each of these geographies. A snapshot of our customers, and these are some of the logos that we've been working with for the past few years. And being a digital technology and marketing solutions agency, we partner with some of the best products out there in the market across different disciplines and practice areas. And this is a snapshot of some of the best of breed products that we wrap our services around and bring these products to our customers to meet business requirements around digital marketing and demand generation. As a firm, we are focused on a few key areas, and these key areas are broadly segregated into strategy, design, technology, and the way that we engage with customers. And we cover pretty much all bases in terms of digital marketing strategy and technology, along with a very strong creative and design team that supports our customers across multiple channels. I'll take a minute to cover what we are going to talk about today in this session. Content marketing is a topic which is not just relevant in today's times, but it also is extremely important with a view to some broad-ranging objectives. These objectives could be as strategic as increase in revenue, and could be as tactical as looking at the individual growth of leads from each channel that you subscribe to with respect to your digital marketing. However, what is important about content marketing is, are you doing the context? Are you doing the context that is actually driving this marketing? Are you enabling your marketers with the kind of intelligence that they need in order to produce the right content? And if not, then what is it that is needed for you to get there? We'll talk about each of these in detail and define how the journey from a purely content-driven marketing organization can be made to an organization that is doing intelligent marketing by leveraging the kind of context and intelligence that content needs to be pushed out to a wide variety of prospects and customers. And finally, we'll talk about the concept of unified customer engagement and why and how it is important, what it enables, and how it can help digital marketers cover so much of territory in terms of their broader objectives and getting from point A to point B as they try and improve their digital marketing initiatives. So let's look at where content marketing is today and what do people feel about it. How is it that the buzz about content is so hot right now and so important, and why is it becoming more and more keystone of strategy as far as marketers are concerned? The thing about content is that it is all pervasive, and it can never be enough or it can never be too little. The balance to achieve out here is to get the right mix of content, and to get the right mix of content, of course, you need to have the right amount of intelligence in order to produce that content. Defining content marketing is probably the easiest task because it's been, as I said, all pervasive. It's existed for for so many years now that people know about it, people read about it all the time, but it's just that the term in itself has been gaining a lot of precedence over the past few years with the advent of so many channels across digital. And that's where the focus has come to be today. We've all read advertorials, we've all read customer publications, we've all read data sheets, and we've all surfed through different kinds of journals, whether it's online or offline, and we've all read about ads and offers and coupons. All of this is broadly classified under an umbrella term which is called content marketing, which used to be called different names for long, but today, with the focus on the internet, content marketing has acquired a whole new meaning to it. And why is it that important? Is because people say that it's important. People say it all the time. They've been saying it for the past few years, from the time that the segmentation of channels and the kind of response rates you associate with different channels has become so important. People have been talking about how content is so important to them and why does it acquire 33% of their total budgets as on date with respect to B2B marketing. Pretty much, we're talking about lion's share of your marketing budget going into creating the right kind of content. And the thing with this is that the trends that we see are that this is likely to increase even further. So with content, you can never be sure about how doing something over 1 year can always be repeatable or predictable next year. So therefore, once you start getting some results through whatever content initiatives you take, there's always an upward curve associated, and that's what is manifest in what you see right now. But when we talk about content, it's very important to talk about who's consuming this content that people are producing. And the visitor or your consumer or your customer or your prospect, all of these people are the people who consume what you produce. And if you see a change in behavior over the set of visitors that this content is intended for, then it's very important that we look at it very carefully. And this is what you see in front of you at this point. In 2012, less than 10% of internet users would actually click on any display ad during the year, and that's a really startling statistic because what it means is that in a room of 100 people, we're only talking to 5 people or 10 people at most. In a closed room, that's the attention span that you have got at the maximum today on the internet. And that's, there's a lot of insight to be taken from that number because it means that, the days of spray and pray of content are over because there's very few people who are actually listening to you. There's very few people who are actually buying what you're producing, and therefore the need is to look at expanding that base, number one. And number two, how do you expand that base? And number three, the people who are actually listening to what you're saying or consuming what you're producing, how do you ensure that they too don't join the other 90%, right? So there are lessons to be learned in the kind of statistics that you're seeing at this point. The other important insight is that engagement rates are really going south. And the main point contributing to this is that even with a lot of sophistication in terms of targeting your message, running your ads, and looking at the right audience at the right time, in the right place, and all those things, the most important aspect of everything is that it boils down to the click-through rates, the amount people are actually investing in seeing your ad, clicking on it, and then looking further. And if engagement rates are going down south, the only reason for that is they're not buying into your content. So this change in behavior is very important because it is one of the prime movers in the fact that your content is lacking something. More affirmation of this is that with all kinds of researches and polls and surveys happening, one pertinent one which we thought was likely to be important to all of you folks is that more than 65% of people actually today are non-clickers. And that means they're not buying into your messaging, they're not looking at your content, they're not interested in listening to what you're saying. And this is a vital statistic because what it means is that you are only looking at a very small cross-section of people that you are reaching out to effectively. There are more proofs to change in behavior of visitors and potentially buyers. There was a time a few years back when the conversations were more of a different nature on the internet. And the thing is that with a very small cross-section of people actually listening to you, and what I showed earlier out here also means that people are saying, I have seen this before, so why do I need to see this again? Or things like, am I supposed to only attend webinars and video walkthroughs and when am I going to work? So it's a case of too much of clutter and very little people to actually look at that kind of clutter and qualify what's right for them and what's not. So as I said, 10 years back, the seller was in control because the seller used to be able to select what they need to send out, to whom they need to send out, and also choose the means of communication. While that has not changed, but what has changed is that earlier on, sellers used to send out info on a one-on-one or a one-on-many basis. So a sales guy would send out a price sheet along with a testimonial to 6 prospects. That's a one-on-to-many relationship that he used to establish with people across his funnel or his opportunity pipeline. On the same coin, marketing folks used to send out data sheets and brochures and white papers to their marketing database. Now, these are people who had elicited some kind of interest at some point in your company, and the marketing folks used to jump over it and say that, look, we want to qualify this further and we want this lead to be really useful for sale. So here goes a sheet and here goes a white paper. So it was more of a one-on-one or a one-on-many basis kind of outbound channel content marketing. Now, things have changed. And there are 2 or 3 things which have drastically changed. One of them is that your website has become the center of all activity. And so much so that everything is centered around your website or microsites or hypersites or landing pages. Everything is residing at the center of the piece. So the website has become important. Okay, great. What else has changed? the mode of conversation has changed as well. So now you have the one-on-one and a one-on-many basis changing over to a many-to-many basis, outbound communication basis. So what it means is that you're actually taking your content and you're putting it out there across websites, across podcasts, screencasts, blogs, discussion groups, and so on. So therefore, your content is out there to be consumed, and you are not necessarily driving that consumption. It is a lot to do with what people are reading there, and therefore deciphering from that, and therefore coming to your site, and therefore becoming a lead. So the change is subtle in a lot of ways and directed in other ways. The subtlety is in the many-to-many conversation that I'm talking about, and it also has a big impact on the kind of content that you are actually producing for consumption. And this content is going to be going across multiple sources, multiple channels from which it's going to be ingested by your consumer or target audience group. So therefore, the shift to self-service leading to many conversations and new types of content coming in and the website assuming a big pride of place in whatever you're doing today are some of the big changes that have happened by behavior. So even if we do have good content, great, but does it actually equate to conversion? Because at the end of the day, conversion is what matters to marketers. Conversion is what happens to have a big bearing on what you transition to sales. And then whatever sales does with it is what's going to impact the revenue. So it's a very straight and straightforward thing that the two graphics that you see here are very illustrative of the fact that the inquiry to marketing qualified lead, that's what an NQL stands for. The inquiry to a marketing qualified lead, that number is truly indicative of how well you're doing as far as your digital marketing is concerned. Because if that number is low, all the other numbers which are going to succeed this stage are going to be lower and lower. If you have a good inquiry to NQL number, your marketing qualified lead to a sales accepted lead, to a sales qualified lead, to an actual win or loss, those numbers are going to be correspondingly higher. Therefore, it makes more sense to have a high inquiry to MQL ratio rather than look at a lot of raw leads which ultimately land up in the bin and are not really used. And that's what we call a marketer's black hole. You get a lot of raw leads which really don't make any sense. There is not enough process or technology which is actually taking those raw leads and qualifying them and also making them worthy to be transitioned as a marketing qualified lead. And we'll talk about this a bit later as part of the session. What it also means is that when you are sending out 100,000 audience base is your target base, and you're sending out your communication to these people, your best case scenario would be to get responses, and I'm not talking about whether they're actually interested in anything that you have, but just purely only responses. Anything between 10 and 25,000 responses out of those 100,000 will actually stand you in good stead, because if you're not getting that number out of your response, then you have a problem with your inquiry to marketing qualified lead stage. And as I said, if that's a problem, then your succeeding stages will be a bigger problem. So what happens when conversions really don't happen? Very predictably, it leads to a dent in confidence. And this confidence gap is very hard to bridge, because when your main weapons are not really producing the results, then you start questioning whether you're doing things right or not. All kinds of research, the best of breed consultants in the market, the analyst firms, and your own capabilities all point out to the fact that, look, these are the 10 usual suspects, and if I nail them, or I nail most of them, I should basically have my bases covered. But if you still don't see conversions, then it's a problem, because then you start trusting nothing. You don't know what's working, what's not working, and then it's a case of too much of information causing a clutter in your brain rather than actually helping you make informed decisions. The challenge with content actually is that not producing enough content is one, or not having the budget to produce content is another. But a cross-section of marketers will always testify to the fact that producing engaging content is usually their biggest bugbear. And this is the kind of content that actually engages with your prospects and customers, which gets them to respond, which increases your inquiries to MQL ratios, which gives you all the wherewithal to actually contribute to a higher sales pipeline and therefore to more sales and revenue. So engaging content is the biggest challenge identified by marketers who have actually burned their fingers, not getting the kind of results that they were expecting out of doing different kinds of content to a larger audience. But if they're not getting the results, then they usually point it to the lack of engaging content. It's worth repeating again that the importance of engagement is kind of in your face, because it's a basis for your marketing and sales organization to work together as a unit which is meant to acquire more and more business. 70% is a large number of leads that are basically longer-term opportunities or worth nurturing opportunities. So we are talking about your critical mass of your leads acquired here in these 70%. If the 70% is really not attended to and not moved to the next stage and not nurtured or not analyzed truly, then you have a problem which is going to be hitting you in the face in terms of your sales-ready leads and your conversions into customers at a later stage. So we've had a first poll done, and it's an interesting cross-section of responses that we've got. The interesting thing is that 56% of you folks believe that your current content strategy in terms of engaging people, prospects, and customers is somewhat effective. 11% of you believe that you folks are doing a great job and you have a lot of these bases covered in terms of the engagement. And 33% of you feel that there's plenty of room for improvement. So it's an interesting snapshot of responses, because it kind of typifies what is symptomatically a problem as we see, the lack of engagement with prospects and customers. So more than half of you feel that you're somewhat there, and a good 30 to 35% of you feel that there is plenty of room for improvement. And that's typically the trends that we've seen in terms of content marketing, leading to engagement. Great, thank you guys. So let's come back to our webinar. I will talk about a few key things here, and one of them is that we've talked about content, its importance, how it leads to better conversions, and it has a big role to play in terms of overall impact and revenue and how content can drive it. For people who are not really getting the results out of their content initiatives, probably are lacking in context. So let's define what is context. Basically, context is the intelligence that you attribute to content. And a good illustration of that is shown through the buying cycle. When your prospects and your customers are buying from you, they usually follow a simple process, which is a buying cycle. Now, this buying cycle will differ from one company to the other, one product or one service to the other. But what will not change is that the broad parameters across these buying cycles will not change. Neither will the kind of logic that you will associate to each of these stages when it comes to defining your content. And I'll speak to that. If we talk about product microsites as an example, product microsites will be an essential tool for you when people are actually considering your product or service and they have already had initial or preliminary conversations with you. They have vetted that you have the capability, you have the right set of services or products that qualify you as a potential partner, but your prospect or customers need to know more about what you have to offer in terms of your product or service. So they want to read in greater detail because they are considering along with you a few other partners whom they can potentially work with. So product microsites is the fit that makes a big difference in terms of a consideration stage in the buying cycle, and so on and so forth. When we talk about taking action towards making a decision, a review of customers is important. So talking about customer testimonials, talking to what customers have written, what they feel, what they perceive of your product or service on third-party forums, all those aspects become important. And that is why customer reviews take the most important place as far as making a decision or taking an action in your buying life cycle. So all these pieces of intelligence indicate that you're actually thinking through what your consumer is going to adopt at different stages in the cycle, and then what you're doing is you're trying to plug in whatever is needed from a content perspective. That, in a sense, is what context is, because you're understanding what your prospective customer is looking for at a given point of time, and you're trying to address that with the right piece of content at the right time. As our poll indicates, and as I said earlier, over our experiences with our customers and dealing with so many different marketers across industries, what we've seen is that there are people who are doing great as far as doing context-driven content. And these people are usually reaping a lot of rewards. And, these are typically industry leaders in terms of they have seen performance in their marketing machinery improving by, percentages as large as 59, 60, 65, or even 70%. What you see is a syndicated piece of research. So they have their own parameters to, publish this research. But just purely out of our experience, we can tell you that there have been customers that we have engaged with who've reported 100% improvement. And there have been people who have been struggling with not even 5 to 6% improvement year on year as far as aggregate performance improvement is concerned. So the problem here is not that you can't improve. The problem here is how do you get there? How do you get to being the best in class, or improving from where you are at this point in terms of your overall performance at a broad level and at a tactical level, looking at how can you increase your acquisition, how can you look at small things like click-through on your emails or your display ad, and how can you improve lead to sales conversion. So all of these are key performance indicators, and the question that you keep coming back to is that how do you actually achieve this 2 to 3 times higher engagement and therefore improve all these KPIs in terms of your digital marketing. As a first step, I think it's important that you recognize that context is important, but for context to be applied, you need to have a common view. And what we mean by saying that is that you have customer information, you have prospect information, and all this information is all around you. It can exist in multiple sources. It can exist in your marketing database, in your analytics, in your CRM, in your content management system, in your data warehouse, or in third-party databases integrated to your marketing database. This data is all around you. So why are you not able to see it? It's because all this information is siloed. It's all there, all right. You have both behavior information and you have profile information, but it's all in different silos, and that's where the problem lies. So our immediate uptake on this is that in order to achieve a common view of your customer, you need to do 2 or 3 things. One is you need to marry your data with intelligence. And how you can do that is by taking data and tagging it with behavior, with profile. So if a prospect is sitting in your Salesforce and the same prospect is actually responding to your email communication, then the fact that you have past history of that prospect in your Salesforce needs to be aligned with the next emailer you send to that prospect, because that next emailer will have the intelligence of that prospect's profile stored already in your CRM. If you don't do that, the email will still go out. That prospect may still respond, but will that response actually elicit him or her to go further in the cycle, to actually consume a piece of content, or want to talk to a rep, or given a lead, or set up a one-on-one session with a practice expert at your end? Chances are no, because he or she does not have the reason to do that, because you have not really attended to his profile and his history and thought about doing a spray and pray approach rather than looking at the context already residing in your systems and using it to your own advantage. So that is an example of where context can make a big difference. So if you were to look at some of the benefits here, I would say that the principal benefit is that you will effectively reduce your blind spots. You will not just stand there and send out your messaging across channels without thinking or without having the right backup of data and intelligence to tell you that, look, I need to drive 6 pieces of content to 6 different sets of users whom I have classified, segmented, and I know what they need, and that is what they're going to get. That's a big difference from running campaigns across pure blind spots. The second advantage is that by doing this kind of common view of a customer or a prospect, you are basically doing a big service to yourself by identifying your John Does out there. There are so many of them out there that you don't know about because you're not reading up on them, because you're not really paying attention to the information around you. So you got to identify your John Does because that will make a big difference in order to target them effectively. I'll give you another very relevant example here. If you send out an email communication to a set of prospects, and one of those prospects actually clicks on one of your emailers and comes to your website. Once that person comes to your website, I'll give you a scenario. What if your website already knows that that person has visited your site before, has clicked on an X piece of content within your emailer or downloaded something from your emailer and then hit your website? Now, if your website were to already have all this information, then it can react differently, right? So when this prospect clicks on your emailer and comes to the site or landing section on your site, he or she will see a piece of content which is relevant to what they have clicked on. And this can be achieved across a large cross-section. It's not about doing a closed group email kind of thing. You can actually apply this kind of logic to any number of users that you send out emailers to. So therefore, what is happening is that your website is aligned with your email campaign or your next display ad or your next podcast. So this alignment is not restricted to only promoting the event or the same display ad content or the emailer content on your site. No, this goes beyond that. This is about having a website ready with the kind of information that it needs about a prospect so that that prospect sees a personalized experience when they land on your site. And that is where context plays a big, big part, because your website is intelligent enough to sense who has come in. Are they already in our database? And if so, where? What is their history? And then the content management system sitting behind your website is able to generate the right content to show to that prospect. That is personalization. So therefore, the advantages of doing a common profiling and view of each of your prospects and customers is critical in order to achieve context-driven marketing. When we talk about what steps you can take to actually move up from only content to context-driven content marketing, one of the first things is that you need to identify your buyers. And understanding your buyer is very, very important because that's the starting point for any marketing initiative, whether it's content or context-driven content. Once you've understood your buyer and once you have identified the segments that you need to be selling to, it's important that you set up and analyze how people are going to buy from you. And that's where the buying cycle approach comes in again, which we alluded to a bit earlier. The buying cycle approach is critical because it will enable you to understand your customer's mindset, what they need at different points of their journey, and how can you service those needs while moving them from one stage to the other. The next step is to segment your audience. Understanding your buyer, segmenting them by their different needs, their characteristics, their profiles, their backgrounds, and their potential requirements, which may be mapping to your products or services. The third step is to map your messages. And this is where the role of content comes in. Once you've segmented your audience, you need to understand how you're going to be marketing different kinds of messaging and content to each segment. You may have 1, 2, 5, or 15 segments, But as long as you know that these are the 15 segments that matter to you from a business acquisition perspective, you would be able to map messages and content in each of those segments. And then finally, we talk about implementing platforms. So you understood your buyer, you have your buying cycle in place, you know your audience, you have your messages ready. Finally, you need to deliver those messages across platforms. Understanding your buying cycle is critical. And as I said, this is a step of 5 or 6 areas which need to be addressed in terms of understanding your buyer and how they buy from you. But this is critical because this is going to drive the type of content you would need to service each stage and moving people from one stage to the other, which is essentially what engagement is all about, as I spoke earlier. Segmenting your audience is the next step. We'll go into that. How do you segment and classify different sections of your audience basis your buying cycle? Needs recognition, information search, evaluation of different options, making a purchase decision, and then engaging. So each of those steps will have different segments of audience tied into them. The third step is to look at your messaging and content and how you basically check in all these boxes with the different criteria and parameters that need to be addressed at each stage of your buying cycle across each of the segments that you have mapped out. What you get out of this is that you create a content map. And what we typically, the way we define a content map is that you are getting into the minds of your prospects. You're trying to understand their needs, their motivations at each stage. What questions would they have at any given stage? What is the kind of information that will appease them at a given stage or make them more certain of moving forward? And what are the other fears and doubts that need to be overcome, right, at every stage in the cycle so that prospects can move from stage A to B to C and so on and so forth. So plugging in each of these stages with the right message, with the right piece of content to overcome the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that buyers may have, giving them the information that they need, all of these will ultimately lead to a content map. So just to summarize what I spoke about, you need to understand your buying cycle. That's step 1. Customize the stages if that's what is needed as far as your prospects are concerned. Look at differentiating between B2B and B2C. Perform a segmentation exercise wherein you identify your prospect base by industry, role, pain points, motivators, fears, needs, requirements, and so on. And then finally, define a content map that addresses expectations of these prospects or customers across the buying cycle. So if you look at the overall context-driven engagement process, the 4 steps that we typically suggest to any of our customers is that you need to employ a closed-loop engagement cycle wherein you build customer profiles, analyze those profiles, and then you respond to them. You need to characterize your prospect, and this is where your buying cycle stage comes in and your segmentation comes in. Step 3 is to develop content to align with what your prospects are expecting. And the 4th step is how you automate the closed-loop prospect engagement. So we'll talk about step 4 in the coming section. The important thing is that as you're getting into this stage, what are the different and key parameters that you're capturing in terms of your prospects and the way they are behaving, right? So there are so many instances where we keep hearing about phrases like A/B testing and multivariate testing and looking at how people are going to respond and then tailoring messages according to that. What it essentially means in the context of an engagement cycle is that once you deliver your messages and capture reaction, that reaction is stored in your analytics and your forms. And for you to actually gain intelligence from that, so that future messages are sharper and more context-driven, so that your next set of content is more aligned to what the customer is thinking, what their context is. This is a typical example. These steps are a typical example of how you achieve a closed-loop engagement cycle. A closed loop is only achieved when you listen to what your customers and prospects are saying and align to that so that you're able to market more effectively to them. A final step in this process of multi-channel engagement and context-driven marketing is automating the closed-loop prospect engagement process. I'll talk about a case study quickly, which gives you a very good insight into how this can actually impact your overall numbers. This is a case study for an IT company which deals in desktops and servers and offers real-time change management capabilities. It's an $80 million company, and this company had a lot of challenges which are typical to technology companies. They're generating a lot of leads, a lot of activity, but the overall results are not improving. I referred to the black hole at the start of my presentation, and there's a typical instance of the black hole. A lot of leads, but not enough going into the sales pipeline. Very low percentage of conversion as far as the sales pipeline. And even the good leads that were going to sales are not really getting closed. And there is a lack of ability to measure ROI transparently and consistently. So this company actually went in and did a major integration exercise where they got in their CRM to integrate with their website, with their content management system, and they deployed a marketing automation tool to take care of their entire email and outbound marketing activity from a content perspective. And one of the advantages was that they grew their lead nurturing from 0 to 60%. So what it meant was that a higher number of leads were effectively getting nurtured as they move into the sales pipeline. They grew their lead to sales opportunity rate. They pumped in an additional 4.9 million in opportunities in their pipeline. They more than doubled their opportunities in their pipeline. And all this was achieved at a one-time integration cost with very little operational expenses as far as the technology component is concerned. So what are these technologies that actually help you automate this process? Content management is what is going to drive personalized integration and conversations on your website. I gave you an example of people coming in, clicking on your emails and coming to your website and seeing personalized content. That is a very good example of how a content management system can actually support your content marketing and acquisition initiatives. A marketing automation platform actually enables personalized interactions via outbound channels. So the intelligence that you have within your systems, I gave an example of this as well, of how you can use your CRM data to actually fine-tune your marketing automation effort and help improve your outbound communication by using the intelligence that you have lying within your systems. And the CRM is supposed to actually create the profiles for buyers, and especially for people who are targeting accounts and prospects within existing accounts. It actually enables, through its data, through its history, and through the various conversations that are recorded as part of the sales cycle, it lends profiles or semi-profiles to a lot of prospects and customers within your existing account base. Integrating these three systems actually leads to creation of a central buyer profile. And that buyer profile or those profiles can then be mapped to your buying process, your buying life cycle, and so on. And the final step is to measure and report, whatever you achieve out of this integration, out of bringing these systems together and the way that they work together, and then implementing the kind of dashboards and performance measurement tools that will be not just transparent, but will actually enable complete view into the entire process and performance improvement. So, just as a quick recap, you create your content map, you develop your content, and then you use your web CMS and your marketing automation to enable marketers to define rules that govern what content is displayed in what context. The context is provided by your systems integration, the intelligence, the data within these three systems. The content map is the content topics that you decide based on your buying life cycle, segmentation, pain points, and motivations of your prospects identified. This is a snapshot of these technologies and the way that they work together, creating a unified engagement platform. And the three technologies that I mentioned are the ones that create these platforms. It's a good time to actually release the results of our second poll. And it talked about the various systems that you have in place already. And it's again an indicator of the kind of systems and the kind of technologies that dominate digital marketing in 2012. As many as 38% of all of you folks are using a content management system, a marketing automation system, as well as a CRM and an analytics platform. So that is a healthy number of respondents who have each of these systems in place. Therefore, you have the necessary wherewithal already in-house. As many as 50% of you are using a CRM system, 13% are using a marketing automation platform. Great, thank you. So if you folks would like to see a demo of our unified engagement platform and the way these three systems work with each other in order to create a marketing machine which speaks to context-driven multi-channel marketing and engagement, please get in touch with us and we'll be happy to walk you through a demo of how you get these three systems to work together to achieve your marketing objectives.
Thank you, Abhiraj. We have a few questions. I'll take them. Since we're running out of time, we'll try and cover as many of the questions as we can. And we'll get to all the unanswered questions via email after the webinar. So the first question is, what is involved in setting up a context-driven strategy? What are some of the first steps we should take to get going?
Okay, so I think the first steps towards getting a content strategy in place are to understand your buyer. I think we talked about that in the session that I had. Understanding your buyer and then segmenting your target audience or your buying audience by the kind of parameters associated there are, I would say, it's the first step, because you need to know your buyer before you talk about your own content. So I think understanding and segmenting your buyer is critical, and prior to that, it's very important that you create a buying life cycle for your product or service, and that buying life cycle can be atypical to your product or service or the kind of buyers you're trying to target. Once you have done these two, then mapping these segments of buyers or prospects that you've created with your buying cycle is the most important stage, because you would know exactly which segment fits into what stage of the buying cycle. Once you have done that, identifying the pieces of content that need to be speaking to each of these prospective buyers across your buying life cycle is what a content strategy foundation is all about. And that's how you arrive at a good content strategy.
Thank you. The next question is, once we have established how we want to segment website visitors, what is the best way to initially push them into one bucket or another?
That's a good question, and the best way to do this is to look at how they have responded on your website or on any outbound piece of communication that you sent to them. Looking at their responses, what they have done in the past, and then using that information from your analytics tool to create a picture is what it's all about. So you may have 5 or 6 different kinds of prospects or buyers who are coming into your site or responding to your email or your display ad, and then looking at their information, if they have filled in a form somewhere, looking at that data, and then creating different kinds of, I'd say, preparatory profiles. That's what is key, because once you have those preparatory profiles, you'll start seeing a trend emerging from the way people are reacting to your email or on your website and what they're downloading, or the way that they have been consuming content or moving from one page or link to the other. So doing those preparatory profiles is important. You may have a larger number to begin with initially of these profiles, but then eventually your overall segmentation of prospects and buyers is where you'll get a good fit. So your preparatory profiles may be 10 and your actual segments could be only 5, but then your preparatory profiles can actually be whittled down over time to those 5 main segments that you're targeting.
Thank you, Abhiraj. The next question is, do you recommend using landing pages that lead into microsites, or can these CMS strategies be implemented on a corporate website level as well?
CMS strategy can be implemented on your corporate website, on your microsite, or on landing pages. So there is no restriction to how you want to leverage your CMS for dynamic content or personalization across any kind of website that your CMS is driving. So there is no restriction, or there is no best practice unless your corporate website is out of bounds as far as acquisition is concerned or active lead generation is concerned, which is the case with a few companies. Unless that's the case, there is no reason why you can't use your CMS for dynamic content across any kind of website.
Thank you, Abhiraj. We do have a few more questions, but we're running out of time, and we'll have to end the webinar now. We'll get back to all the unanswered questions via email after the webinar is over. At this moment, I would like to thank you, everyone, for attending our webinar. We hope you found it informative. The webcast will be available on our website within the next 3 business days, and we'll also be sharing the webcast URL with all the attendees via email. Please feel free to reach out to us at contact@edynamic.net for any questions you may have. Thank you once again. For your